Welcome to I Caught It on Audio. This is 64 Tacos Book Club Episode 9, Dune, Part 4.
Hello and welcome to I Caught It on Audio. Today we are doing our 64 Tacos Book Club podcast. This is the fourth episode in which we're talking about the Frank Herbert sci-fi classic Dune. We're going to cover the second half of Book 2, and I'll start us off with a brief summary of events in this section. A child man, Paul, and his weirding mother, Jessica, were found by Stilgard and the Fremen. Stilgard's hands taste Jessica's loveliness. Paul meets the elfin-faced Cheney. Paul and Jessica go with the Fremen. Paul kills Jameson in the hot blood of a knife fight and selects the name Paul Madib. Paul does not want the water distilled out of Jameson's body. The Fremen take things from the bulging sack at Stilgard's feet. Paul sings a love song to the girl child Cheney. Fade Ralpha puts poison on a long blade. Jessica takes My Body, My Choice to the extreme. And Paul continues to give moisture to the dead. Matt, do you have a question to start us off with?
Okay, yeah. It doesn't have chapters in the book.
No.
And my library book got returned, so I ended up buying the audiobook. I could still be a part.
You could have just renewed it.
Yeah. There were all the copies were gone. I tried renewing it.
Really? I was able to renew it.
Just as I went to bed last night, they're like, "Oh, the book you reserved is free."
Okay.
Great.
Well, you purchased it, so that's cool.
So, and I'll listen to it again. I'm enjoying the book, so it's not a bad purchase. Did we do the part with the Baron and the gladiatorial ring?
Yes.
Okay. That's when Fade Ralpha puts.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I was just going to ask if that was that whole thing with the Duke and the whatever.
The Duke and the Count.
The Count was as annoying as it was.
Oh my God,
in the audiobook. It's so bad in the audiobook.
Absolutely was in the text. And in fact, I actually went to go and listen to the audiobook just to hear if it was as bad as the way that I
Can one of you guys is that exactly how they did it? Just
pretty much.
It is. Yeah.
I feel like they could have done a better job than just reading the letters out loud.
Well, it was a little musical. It was like,
oh, that's terrible.
They should have pumped it through like the auto tune so that
There's a great description of it, like he's being pushed through a mush something or other, right? I don't remember exactly what, and that's exactly how it sounds.
That was one of
what the text said.
I think that was one of Fade's little thought bubble things where he's like he felt like his brain was getting turned to mush. Listen to this guy. And one of my questions pertains to this. So why does the Count Fenring, why does he intentionally sound like a buffoon except for when he's discussing business? So that was like, it's very clear that he's doing all the mumbly, type of stuff. But then as soon as he's down to business with the Baron in private, or even talking to the lady Fenring about, her fornications with Fade,
seducing Fade.
All that crap goes away. And so that was clearly very intentional. Is he trying to make people think that he's this like idiot or something, the way that he talks?
That would be my guess. Yeah.
That's my best guess.
I mean, the Baron mentions it that he looks like a rabbit. Or acts like a rabbit, but
he looks like a rabbit. The Baron is definitely one of the two a-holes.
Jason Sudeikis plays the Baron, but he's a killer. So it's all, I think, an illusion or a distraction, so that people don't take him seriously.
I mean, there was definitely some interesting stuff going on there with how, it was this kind of duplicity with the Paul fights with Jameis, their little knife fight thing going on in the Fremen zone. And then you've got Fade fighting with the gladiator. So I really like that duplicity going on between those two scenes, if you will. I thought it was interesting how, the fight with Jameis, Paul's fight with Jameis was sort of out of necessity. He didn't want to do it. He was just like, nah, I don't want to be a part of this, but he was called out and he had to. And then the fight with Fade is just this, very showy, and they talked about it as gladiatorial because I'm sure it was trying to reference back to Roman times where that was what these, all these people did was go and watch the violence. The situation with the actual gladiator is, they usually had slaves that would fight. But this time around, Thufir inserted a former Atreides warrior, I think was what it said.
Yep.
This was one of my questions. Do we think Thufir is trying to make plans with Fade on another level outside of the plans with the Baron, and then also make his own plans, hoping that maybe the Atreides guy will somehow find a way to defeat Fade? Do you think that there's a third layer going on there?
That was my initial thought. The password or the secret word that made the guy freeze was in place. Like, that seems like it would be a good thing to leave out.
Yeah, it was still rigged in that regard. But who knows, maybe Thufir thought that it would be, before he even got to that point, this warrior would have been able to do something to Fade. I don't know. I think you're definitely onto something, because there's always plans within plans within plans, it seems.
Yeah, I don't doubt for a second that Thufir has a master plan to take down the Harkonnens at some point. I don't think that he can be reprogrammed the way that the Baron seems to think he can.
Yeah.
So the Baron's poisoning him, but he didn't tell him he's poisoning him?
Correct.
Right.
He's poisoning him and giving him the antidote. Or he poisoned him.
He's poisoned, and he's giving him the antidote daily.
Yep.
But it seems like you'd have more power over the person if you're like, hey, this happened, do what I say or else.
Then you run into a Dr. Yue situation, I feel like, and I don't think the Baron wants that. Like, the Baron, I think, had every intention of killing Yue from the get-go. Whereas with Thufir, he wants to be able to use him. I feel like if he knows that there is a chance that the Baron could betray him, it's less likely that he'll do what the Baron wants him to do.
He's a mentat, right? So he knows that the Baron's going to betray him, just a matter of when.
Well, I think if the Baron tells him that he is being poisoned and is receiving an antidote with his food, he would probably then try to make arrangements to get his antidote a different way. So I think the surprise is kind of important, because if he tries to run, he'll just die before he knows exactly what's going on. But if he gives a mentat time to think, okay, I've got a poison in me, let me just try to figure out what the poison is. Let me try to figure out the antidote. Maybe I can work around this, which is something that a mentat is specifically designed to be able to figure out. So maybe there's a little bit of an advantage to him not knowing what's going on. I actually have another thought about the gladiatorial sequence. You mentioned, Zach, that there's a parallel going on where they each fought a battle to the death. And I think the thing that I found interesting about that was the battle to the death, while unnecessary in a way between Paul and Jameis, it wasn't necessary other than for honor or for pride, or perhaps to prove that Jessica and Paul were who they were believed to be. But it was a real battle. It was a fair battle, more or less. Jessica did sort of implant a little fear, and then Cheney gave Paul some information. But the battle that we see in the gladiatorial ring between Fade Routha and the Atreides man was only partially unrigged, in the favor of the Harkonnens. And I thought that there was another cool parallel, which is there's this illusion of grandeur and glory on the city that the Harkonnens control, imaginatively named Harko. And
that's not
it makes sense.
Unprecedented. They're
named after where they come from.
Yes. Harko. They're the Harkonnens.
Yeah.
Earthling.
I think the Count and his wife note that while they cleaned up the main thoroughfares and the gladiatorial ring and made everything look festive, you could see
Splashed paint on the walls.
Exactly. Yep. You could see the rot underneath it out in the outskirts. and when you saw the people. That was a parallel with the actual battle between Feyd-Rautha and his opponent. And it all appears to be this glorious thing, but really it's rotten to the core.
Yeah.
Which, just in case you were wondering, the Harkonnens are bad. And yes, once again, the Baron sees the beauty in a woman, an adult woman, only to think she reminds him of a young boy's neck.
Yeah.
So he's like, she is pretty hot in the way that a young boy is hot.
Yeah.
Bad guys, definitely bad guys.
What do you guys think was the most interesting character development in this section?
I thought it was neat to get to know Feyd-Rautha, honestly. I don't like him, but we got to learn more than just the Baron's insights about him. We got to see him and his thought process in the battle and how he was cunning and, of course, stacked the deck in his favor. Matt, what did you? Who was your favorite character in this section?
Well, I'm in agreement with you. I also like Stilgar and a bit more of the look into Fremen society.
Yeah, it was neat to get to know how the Fremens work. I think they're a bunch of heartless assholes, but
maybe living in the desert would do that to you.
Yeah,
after
I
many
think
generations.
I haven't lived their life, so
would do that to you. Yeah.
You're water soft, Dave.
I am. I have my share of water. That's for sure.
I thought the whole thing with him either getting Jamis's wife as a slave for a year or as a actual relationship, and the children responsibility was an interesting wrinkle too. And also an interesting thing for Paul to be like, I don't really want to do this. What do I have to do here? I don't want to take you as my wife. Got my eye on Liet Kynes' daughter at this moment.
The elfin-faced Cheney.
Yeah. Oh, is she elfin-faced? I was only mentioned 17 times. Actually, that didn't really bother me, but at one point I was like, all right, gotcha. Like there are other adjectives, or maybe no adjectives works,
How many more faux pas are we going to get from Paul as he doesn't know the culture and the ways of the Fremen? Because we seem to learn about all of the ways of the Fremen by Paul doing things very strangely, by asking Cheney to hold his water rings and shedding moisture for the dead. And
it all works out though, doesn't it? It all is tilted towards his benefit. Everything he does that's incorrect, they're like, oh, that means something very important. Thanks, Bene Gesserit.
Yeah.
I think this was the big section of him not knowing what's going on so that we could learn about it and so he could learn about it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting to, I think the next section is going to be the section where stuff starts kicking off because he knows what's going on. And he's going to build his life with them. But this was the sort of first impressions, like culture shock sections. We'll see. Maybe I'm sure there's more stuff that he's going to run into that he doesn't understand how to deal with.
He seems very against his vision of the jihad in his name.
Yeah.
And, do you think that he's doing it just he's against that because he doesn't want there to be so much bloodshed? Do you think he's afraid of what that future kind of means? Do you think that will really shape his ability to make decisions going forward by him like always kind of going back to that? In a way, it seems like it might make someone go nuts if they've got this vision of the future and then they're kind of constantly trying to be careful of what they do to try and avoid that.
That would drive someone nuts.
Also, every time he has to ceremoniously partake in spice, it like kicks up his future visions, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It makes him think further on what can I do to avoid the thing that I keep seeing. It's so hard to avoid.
But we know that it's not always correct because like when they're first in the cave and before the knife fight, he gets to eat the spice-infused chicken wing, and then he sees his own death. But that doesn't come to fruition. So he knows that the visions are not always correct and not always going to happen exactly the way that he sees them.
Yeah, it seems like it changes every time an event happens and then new pathways open up almost. That's how I'm sort of thinking of his impressions. Like he sees the possibilities and maybe some are tough to avoid, like the jihad, but others will switch the moment a word is said or an event happens. What do you guys think the effect will be on the unborn child of Jessica with her sort of like mind meld with the old Reverend Mother when she sort of takes over.
My understanding of what happened was she drank the
Water of life.
water of life. She drank the water of life, and that combined her consciousness with the old Reverend Mother's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also made her trip balls. Yes.
Right, of course. But then she gains all of the knowledge and memories that the old Reverend Mother got, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The question is, does the unborn child also get that? Or does it mess the unborn child up, rendering its mind useless? Or does it have no effect? And I think the unborn child is going to get all of the consciousness from both Jessica and the Reverend Mother. Yeah, that's my take. What do you guys think?
I'm in agreement with you. I don't know how much of the consciousness the baby will get, but it will definitely have heightened consciousness.
It's definitely a thing that's not normally done or ever done as far as, the Reverend Mother is concerned. The other question I had related to this was, what do you think is the reason that the Reverend Mother says that a male child would die, whereas a female child would be able to handle it? Is that because this is only a job for a woman, the Reverend Mother, the Bene Gesserit? What's going on there?
That whole skill set seems like it's definitely slanted towards the women. Like, they were really nervous about Paul being taught that stuff. Yeah, I think that it's just in this world, men's minds aren't good at that.
Do you think that the Reverend Mother is wrong and just assumes that if it was a boy child, it couldn't handle it, or that a boy child actually couldn't handle it?
I think a boy child actually couldn't handle it. Do we have any women mentats?
I don't think we've met any.
No,
that we
because
know of.
it might be
not that I know of.
just one of those things where like men's brains have been engineered to go this way and women's brains have been engineered to go that way.
I don't know, Matt. This was written in the 60s, and they were pretty sophisticated on these things in those days, so seems unlikely.
I'm sure Frank Herbert was part of women's liberation, so...
Oh, you go woke, you go broke, so...
Yeah.
Men are from Arrakis, women are from Caliban.
Caliban.
Pretty much, yeah. I think that's right.
I think Frank Herbert, I know that he was supposed to write a long article about sand dunes in Oregon. So he went and did it and never wrote the article, but then that's where he had the idea for Dune. He also liked doing mushrooms. So I think it's just like, he was like, oh, this, all the things around me, let's do hallucinogenics and we'll do dunes and this will be great. Yeah. I don't know how detailed his thoughts were as far as gender politics. He definitely had some opinions on what the world building for his novel should be, because it's extremely detailed.
No shortage of gender roles, and they're not necessarily the traditional gender roles as we know them. And he's got his ideas that he uses specifically for this. Like, the women are by far the most powerful as the Bene Gesserit,
but they're still put into sort of more of a patriarchal hierarchy.
Right.
And they're also, of course, feared as women who with power are, it seems like.
Right.
I thought all the Fremen stuff with the water was really interesting, like how they're so precise about the amounts, and they have their own sort of water is like the currency, but they have like this representation of it with these rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if that's how they do things. And when you go and you fight somebody and kill them, you get to have their water and essentially their water wealth. Do they have laws or something where that stops? If some Fremen got really greedy, couldn't he just go on a killing rampage and then take everybody's money? And like, did that happen in the early days? And then they came up with laws to stop that?
My understanding is that if it's in an honorable combat, then you get their water.
Yeah.
So like Jameis and Paul had their sanctioned fight, their battle.
Tahati, I think is what it was called.
Sure. And therefore, the victor of that got the other person's water.
And I'm pretty sure that any criminal would be immediately murdered and stripped of his water in this society. They don't screw around. Mm-hmm. So I think if you killed somebody when you weren't supposed to, they'd be like, cool, we're just going to kill you now and give the water to either the widow or the tribe.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a detailed court system.
Everything's brutal. Like that's their environment and that's their society.
Savages.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely presented as that in a certain way.
Yeah,
they are seen as that by the Empire and the Conans, but not so much by the Atreides. Strange and brutal, but maybe not savages.
Right.
I thought it was interesting when Jameis, after Paul killed Jameis, they made note about how they broke his crysknife. I was wondering if there's some specific purpose to that, or if it was just sort of symbolic as, that knife was that person's. Why didn't they give that to Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of ceremony. I don't know if they said he'll need it in the next life, or I don't know that they get much into detail about what they believe happens after you die.
Yeah, I don't remember anything.
You're taken away with the next moonrise, but beyond that, I don't think they go into at all where you go.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they did say that Jameis was happy. There was a lot of moisture in the air in the one place, so therefore Jameis was happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that implies some
sort of afterlife,
post-death something. Yeah.
Presence.
Mm-hmm. Jameis's ghost was peeing on them.
Yeah. Giving them moisture.
I just find that
they'd be down. They'd be like, "Cool,
moisture.
let's collect it."
Yeah. I
Put it in my thigh pouch.
The crysknife stuff really fascinating, just because it's this weapon that's came from the Shai Hulud, the sandworm, is basically a tooth, a part of the tooth of the sandworm.
Makers.
Which the question is, how the frick did they get those? But then that's a lot of questions of like, how do they get the water of life? How do they, It's just a fascinating object that they make such a big deal out of it, and they have all these rituals and customs, but it's all kind of mysterious. You don't know a lot about it. I did look up crysknives on like some Dune Wikipedia type of thing, and fandom or whatever wiki. It was talking about how there's two different kinds. There's a kind that is like stable, and then there's a kind that's not stable. And the kind that's not stable is what most people have. It has like this energy thing that when it's with the person, it can't leave the person's body or whatever for a certain amount of time, or it will lose its stability and break. So there's some very interesting stuff going on with those things and their relation to the sandworms.
So maybe Jameis had an unstable one, so it didn't matter. Once he died, it wasn't going to be useful to anybody else anyway.
Yeah. Once his energy was gone, it wasn't going to be useful unless it passed on. Because that's what I think was happening with the one with Mapes. Mapes gave it to Jessica, and that one, it didn't say if it was stable or not stable, but my assumption was that one wasn't stable, and it had to stay with someone, or it was going to lose its integrity and fall apart.
So during the when the Count is talking to
the Baron,
he's doing his stuff, right? But then after that whole scene, like after the fight, they go to the Count and the
Lady Fenring. So the Count and Lady Fenring are talking, but they're doing their humming talking, and they use the same. I don't know if you recognize this, Matt, but they use the same sound effects as they did when it was Kynes' father talking to him in his head.
Oh, I didn't notice that. No,
they had that weird voice filter and humming noise and all that stuff.
When was this? What conversation did they do this with?
When the Count and the Lady Fenring were talking after the gladiator battle.
About her seducing
yes.
Fedra
and carrying his child. Yeah.
And they were, my impression was they were talking in their humming dialect or whatever, so that it couldn't be detected. And that's why it got the special sound effect treatments.
I thought initially it must have been the cone of silence or whatever when Fenring and the Baron were talking.
Yes.
Because that would have an effect, but it wasn't that section. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. Obviously, that wasn't written on the page, so I didn't think about that possibility. I wonder what they were trying to do when they were making those decisions.
The part that I listened to was very strange. How it jumped from just the narrator guy talking and doing all the voices to then the play version where the Baron and the Count were talking with different voices.
Yeah, I'm sure it's infinitely more expensive to voice all of it than it is to have the narrator do the voices for some of it. But man, when they do the actual voices, it's so much better.
I feel like there were more voices in the first part.
Yeah, it seems like it. It's just unfortunate, especially when the narrator has to do the female voices, and he takes a higher tone or is more breathy, or he does fine. Like it's not bad, but the actual voice actors doing the voices in the play style is so much better that when you don't have that, it's kind of lacking.
Well, I'd imagine it's way easier to keep things straight in your head, especially with his weird technique of jumping into the thoughts of characters paragraph to paragraph, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
And like the Baron's, the narrator's voice for the Baron is fine, but the voice actor for the Baron is so good. He's just
Sounds
got
like
this,
James Earl Jones almost.
yeah,
he's
that
deep,
really
booming,
deep voice
and
and
you
booming.
know he's a bad guy. You just know
Yeah.
from this awesome voice.
You're like, I'll forgive the boy diddling, but this voice screams bad guy to me.
So that's about it for this episode. Tell us what you think of Dune in the comments. Like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. If you want more content like this, you can find everything we've done at 64tacos.com. And if you really liked it, go to buymeacoffee.com/64tacos and you can buy us a taco. Thanks for listening.
I caught it on audio.
So, Matt.
Wait. I have some questions.
Okay.
I would like Matt to pronounce how he heard all the names that he wrote down. Is it Cheney in the recording or is it Chani?
It's Cheney.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And
this
obviously,
is my synopsis you're looking at.
oh, is it yours,
Matt's.
Dave?
Yeah, I wrote this.
Okay. How is Jamis? Is it Jamis? Is that how
It's
they pronounce it?
Jamis.
Okay.
Jameis.
Yeah, Jamis.
And then okay, that's I
Still
think
and Stilgar.
well, yes, obviously there's no D in Stilgar.
Is it?
It's obvious if you're reading, I guess, because you can see the letters. But it's funny how when you're listening to it, sometimes you know how they say it is confusing.
How is Madib written?
MUAD apostrophe DIB, right?
Oh.
Wadib. Yeah.
And how is Paul spelled?
Normal normal style.
I don't feel comfortable. And how
I really like Fade Ralpha.
King Ralpha. Yeah.
That's what it says. How is it written? How's Fade Ralpha written?
FEYD.
So that's fine.
And then what's the second part?
RAUTHA. Ralpha.
Yeah.
Ralpha. Yeah.
Just not pho.
Fade Ralpha.
Yeah, Dave here's what he wants to hear. He's
hear
like
what they
Haley.
say.
He's Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense. He hears what he wants to. He doesn't know he's dead.
Now that we've spent 20 minutes on how to pronounce things, what do we got for questions?